All right, one of the most important topics that I think that a lot of authors miss out on is the topic of conventions and booth design. I'm going to be completely honest with you. My sales don't come online. Those are hard. Those are really hard to build and they take a lot of time, and you have to publish a volume of work to actually generate any kind of numbers that are worth a damn. And that's just the honest truth. Um, I will say probably, and this is just me spitballing, and probably about 90% of my sales come from in person sales at conventions. And what does that mean? That means that not only do I work a full time job, but a lot of times on the weekend, I will spend my Saturday or Sunday, or sometimes more if it's a 4-day show, hauling all of my shit somewhere and spending all day in a convention hall and setting everything up myself, lugging books around, putting up heavy grid wall. It's not an easy task. But I do it because I want to be successful at this. And in order to actually capture those sales, you are going to have to hit the pavement. You cannot sit behind your computer and think that it is going to happen. If you do that, I can promise you failure. It's just how it is. So, the best way to get started is to look for conventions and stuff in your hometown area. And for the first few conventions, you definitely want to be close by. You want to make sure that you have more than one book. One book, most people are very leery about buying anything, even an incomplete trilogy. So let's say I have 2 books out of 3, and that's all I've got. A lot of times people will pass because there are so many authors out there that start writing and they just don't finish the story. So readers are hesitant to purchase that if you have not proven that you can finish the story. So once you actually finish the trilogy and you have a fully complete set of books with a full story intact, those books will start to sell. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to get out there and at least get people to pick up some books or to get your name out there. I would definitely still do that, but just keep in mind you're not going to sell as much because that is going to be the hurdle that you're going to be up against. Now, I have like 13 books out there, so people look at me and they're like, well, she can obviously produce, and I have finished 4 trilogies now. So I'm able to finish the story so people feel a little bit more comfortable purchasing from me. But like I said, that takes time, obviously. You're going to want to start small. Look for places that might be interested in your writing, and sometimes those are surprising places. When I was first starting out, I quickly discovered that, I write in fantasy and science fiction. I thought, oh, pop culture conventions, they love having the Avengers actors there, signing autographs, or the cast of Arrow from the CW signing autographs. What I found is that the people who go to those conventions, they're there for fan art. They're there to get their autographs for their favorite actor or character. They are not interested in original content. So lesson learned, and those booths can be quite pricey. So I learned my lesson there. I had a year where I had just a lot of really big shows that cost a lot of money and didn't return on my investment at all, because they weren't looking for original content. So where are you going to go for those things? I typically kind of steer towards, if it's not local, gaming conventions, especially for the fantasy. The science fiction doesn't sell as well there, but the fantasy sells sometimes, not always. Definitely my gaming stuff sells there because I have a couple games out there that I've designed. But honestly, one of my biggest shows of the year is a local craft fair, and I never would in a million years would have figured that that would have been the place that I would have sold books. In fact, I set up outside in a tent, and I think it opened at 9, and I sat around until noon, and not a single person stopped by my tent. And I thought, I'm going to lose my ass on this. I'm not going to sell a single book. People are just going to walk by. This is not my market. Nobody's interested. And then after noon, Boom, sales hit. By the end of the first day, I'd already made booth, and into the second day, I was making nothing but profit, and I sold a shit ton of books. And I never in a million years would have guessed that that would have been the place that I sold books. So, you do want to kind of take some risks. I'm sure part of my advantage was that it was my hometown. And so it was easier for me. I knew people, and people are like, oh, look, it's a person that lives in our town that publishes books. We want to buy those. Made things easier, I'm sure. And then from there, I have basically you establish your core. And there will come a point where, if you do those events, the sales will diminish because the people who have bought your books in that area already have them. And so if they're frequenting that event, if they've already bought the book, they're not going to buy it again unless you continuously produce new stuff that they're interested in. But then you kind of have to expand from there and try new events. And eventually, hopefully, you feel confident enough that you can do some overnights. Because once you start to add a hotel expense into things, then you have to sell that many more books in order to be profitable. So keep in mind, start small, expand your marketing area, finding your sweet spot. Like I said, the craft fair seems to be my sweet spot, which is weird because it's the best event every single year. So one of the important things to do is make sure that you do track your sales so that you can determine what conventions are profitable and which ones aren't. And we'll talk more about the figures and making booth and how to determine whether or not your event was actually profitable or not. But we can talk about the math later. But things to consider whenever you're designing your booth. I see a lot of author booths and they're very bland. They have, their tablecloth, they have their books stacked there. Usually not a lot going on. I remained very successful because I did things like I had dragons on these plastic shelves where I put like a lantern behind it that looked like fire was flickering behind the dragon. And so these lights kind of would draw people to my booth. You have to physically draw people to your booth. And what I mean by that is be available. You cannot have your phone in front of your face. You can't have your computer out. You can't have your notebook out working. I'm not saying you can't jot things down here or there, but you're not going to plug through a chapter while people are walking all around you and ignore them. You need to say hi. How are you? How's your convention going? Make eye contact. Talk to people. You cannot bury yourself and not make eye contact and expect to make sales because it's not going to happen. Now, there's a double-edged sword to that. You can also be the person who hoots and hollers at people as they're walking by that basically scares the customers away. And I've seen that one too. I did a convention one time that this guy stood out in front of his book and out in front of his booth. And every time somebody walked by, he just jammed his book into that person's hand and just started talking to him about it, whether they wanted to hear about it or not. And a lot of people would give the book back to him, and then they'd walk to the other side of the aisle. So they would avoid my booth because they're trying to avoid his booth because he's being obnoxious. So don't be that person either. Make sure that you're being courteous to the people around you, and just don't do the hard sales. Those are really annoying too. Just be courteous and friendly, open, ready to have a conversation. And it may not even be about your books. It may be about something else. But in booth design, of course, you want to make sure that whatever you're bringing with you is portable. Depending on what kind of vehicle you have, you're going to be transporting books. Those are going to be heavy. They're going to take up a lot of room. So any of your display items need to fit in whatever vehicle you had. I had to up my vehicle. I had a car. It didn't work. Now I have an SUV, and we've pretty much outgrown that too. I make it work for smaller events, but bigger events, my business partner has a truck, and sometimes we rent a trailer depending on what we've got. Use bright colors, make your pricing clear. I had an author that I thought it was weird. He had a spiel where he would say, well, it's this price, but if you pay with card, then it's this price. because of the card fee. And I'm like, the customer doesn't want to hear about the card fee. Just include it in everything and just make your price and call it a day. It's really annoying to tell them a bunch of different prices depending on how they pay. Just one price, that's it. I do book bundles for my trilogies, so definitely pointing out what they save, like if you buy this from me, if you buy all 3 of these, you save, $5, also telling them they can have the book signed too is also a plus, it's a selling point. Using the signage to promote the books, using signage to promote you. Many people don't even, I noticed this whenever I first started doing events, people don't realize that you're the author behind the book, that's sitting behind the booth. So you'll start talking to them and be like, oh, you're the author? Yes, I am. And I can sign that book for you. It surprised me that a lot of people didn't realize that I was actually the author of the books. Clearly display your books on stands. I noticed that a lot of people don't like to pick up the book and read the blurb on the back, so they'll look at it and you have to tell them it's okay to pick it up and read the back of it. I had a display one time when I had fewer books where I would have all of the books displayed and then I would have them turned over on the front of the booth so that people could just kind of walk by and read a blurb if they wanted to on the back of the book and they didn't have to touch anything. I do find that standing at the booth sometimes is easier than sitting. Walking out in front and talking to people, engaging with the customers, finding the gimmick that works for you. I used dragons. It seems to bring a lot of people in. Incorporate lighting, music, anything that sets you apart. Make sure that you have the appropriate promotional items. Also indicate where they can get things if they don't buy there. So, if they have ebooks, give them a card so that they can purchase the ebook online. I actually have ebook cards that the digital book is uploaded on the card so I don't lose the sale right then and there. Here, I can sell you the ebook right now. So they can't walk away and forget about it. Mailing list signups, list all of your website and your social media, try to pick up additional followers. I went to a convention recently and started talking to people that, we had some mutual interests and we decided, they ended up following me. I picked up 3 followers at that one event. And then, of course, plug your future events. Where are you going to be? See if you can get them to come out to that. If you're doing any kind of a talk, a lot of times at conventions, if you're able to sign up and do an author talk, you talk about the process of writing. You can engage people that way as well. So those are some things to consider. But if you really want to make money and start selling some books, you're going to have to do it in person. So figuring out how to do that sooner rather than later is probably going to be your best bet for sales.